My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, today I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough, which is how to mitigate loss during an unexpected disability and how to plan for retirement when your ability to work is suddenly interrupted. Many people think of disability as something that happens to other people or something that's only relevant later in life. But the truth is, disability can happen to anyone at any time. I remember we met with a nurse who was in her 40s, who ended in her early 40s, who had a stroke and was no longer able to work. So we do see these occurrences where the unexpected happens. So I don't want this conversation to incite fear in anyone. It's just about being informed and prepared. So let's get into it. Can you tell me about? I know you just had a client recently who had a question about just getting disability right away. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, disability is the type of insurance, kind of like long-term care insurance, where we really struggle to talk about it because, for most of us, our income is our greatest potential asset. I mean, it's especially for younger people. And so ensuring that income is critically important. Well, I had this person come to me and she said, my husband had a heart condition actually, and very unexpected. He needed some surgeries. It was going to be an extended time period of recovery. And she wanted to be there to help make sure that, she could help him through that recovery period. So she was going to take unpaid, FMLA leave, Family Medical Leave Act, and wanted to know, is there an insurance that I can just buy like right now in order to give me my income while I'm taking this unpaid leave? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, how many people out there think that insurance companies are in business to lose money? Like, you're just going to give me a few $100 in premiums. I'll give you tens of thousands of dollars in income. And then once you get through your issue, just drop the coverage and you're good to go. I mean, that is not how insurance works. So, one of the things about disability coverage is it is critically important for a lot of people. Most of the people we help have it through group coverage at work. If you do not have group coverage, now it becomes more complicated because in most cases you're going to want to evaluate buying a policy, privately, which can be very expensive for good coverage. Now that private policy might be much better at claims paying than the group policy, but the group policy might be paid for by your employer, or maybe it's very low cost, through your employer coverage. So this is a topic that for a lot of people is confusing and it's hard for us to address.
Yes, it is definitely confusing. And we've seen, unfortunately, oftentimes people don't think about it until an event occurs, and then they have to encounter challenges that they weren't expecting. I know we meet with nurses who have a pension, and sometimes they do have a disability component attached to that pension. Do you want to talk about some of the challenges you've seen when it comes to getting those claims, and not specifically with their pension, but just in general? Is this something that's common?
Well, these particular nurses have a union negotiated long-term disability benefit. And that benefit is actually integrated with their pension, which is very confusing for most people. If they get a long-term disability claim, their pension continues to grow. And so it gets confusing on like when do you claim pension and how do you do these different things? And we happen to know pretty much all of their details, but they don't. And I will tell you from experience that even though this is a very large group plan and administered by a very large reputable insurance company, almost every nurse situation I've run into where they considered themselves long-term disabled, unable to perform their functions of their work, In almost all cases, they were initially denied benefits. Now, in many of those cases, what they did is they then had to retain legal counsel, they had to fight for their benefits. In many cases, they were successful, but it might have taken them 6 months or maybe even a year in order to get those benefits. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, like the world we live in. But at the same time, again, insurance companies are not in the business of losing money. They want to make darn sure that you are being truthful in your long-term disability before they start paying you substantial potential benefits over a long period of time. So this comes back to our core financial planning in that we want you to have strong emergency reserves. For a lot of these people, we do want you to accumulate sick leave through work so that, hey, maybe I can use sick leave or vacation time in order to be able to bridge me across during this time period where maybe I have to fight to get my long-term disability benefits. So the stronger the position you're in, the more consistently you live within your means. It helps us navigate these, kind of storms that life will throw at us, and long-term disability being one of the most impactful financial storms you'll ever face.
Yeah, that's why we call those first three levels of the hierarchy of cash flow those foundational pieces. You have to make sure your foundation is firm because you never know what's going to happen. And like you said, in these situations where there is an unexpected disability, that foundation is what can help to bridge you until you are able to get disability benefits. So good point there. And similar with the pension, Social Security, obtaining Social Security disability payments is kind of the same situation where you're encountering challenges. You want to talk about that?
Well, some people say, well, I don't need long-term disability because if I get disabled, Social Security will cover me. And they don't realize that first off, Social Security disability does not cover that much, especially if you're a higher income earner. But the second thing is, I don't know the exact statistic offhand, but something like 90% of all initial Social Security disability claims are denied. And then you reapply, and then a lot of times they're denied again. And then again, a lot of people will retain legal counsel and they might eventually get approved, but it could take a long time before Social Security starts to pay out benefits. So I would not recommend for most people that they just rely heavily on Social Security disability benefits as being their only source of potential coverage for any lost income that they might have. So the issue here is a difficult one for most people because, if I have group, should I be supplementing that group with a private policy? In general, the private policy is going to be more expensive, but in our experience, it's more likely to pay out the actual claims, like without fighting about it. So, do I do that? If I don't have access to group, how much am I willing to spend in order to be able to buy a policy that realistically can allow my family to maintain quality of life? I have a long term disability policy. And that policy, when I first bought it, I debated long and hard about even doing it. But I thought, hey, I'm the only income earner in our household. I need this just in case something would happen to me. And, I've paid that premium over the years and I look at it and I go, is that really necessary? Would they even provide benefits if I were disabled? And thankfully, I've been fortunate to this point to not need it. But these are difficult planning conversations to have.
Yeah, and that goes back to what we've talked about in the past about there being so many choices when it comes to financial planning. There's so many decisions that have to be made, and sometimes it's not just an easy path like, yes, automatically go get that disability insurance policy. Ideally, we would want people to have sufficient disability insurance, but there is that balancing act between being able to manage the quality of life you want, um, taking care of those risks that may be out there and making sure that at the end of the day you have peace of mind with everything that's in place for your financial well-being.
So all I can stress is what you mentioned earlier, that really making sure those initial layers of the hierarchy of cash flow we talk about this over and over and over again. And then when somebody faces a challenge, like that example I gave, that woman who was reaching out and saying, hey, my income is going to be affected like soon. What can I do? What insurance can I get now in order to take care of that? Unfortunately, they didn't have emergency reserves.
Mm,
She was the primary income earner. She wanted to take this time off, but they could not afford to lose her income. And
mhm.
it's partly because they had not done a great job of taking care of those initial, foundational layers of their hierarchy. And it's tough for us to tell these people, hey, now you've got some really tough challenges to face.
Yeah. So what do you say to the person who may be younger, maybe in their 30s or 40s, who has this unexpected disability, but they still want to plan for retirement? How do you balance that out?
Well, that's tough, obviously. It would depend on, is this a disability that's permanent?
Mhm.
If you get Social Security disability, like if somebody has certain conditions, they'll automatically get approved. We've had people with liver cancer and they were automatically approved. And, in some of those situations, they will get their Social Security disability. Eventually, they'll transition that over to their retirement Social Security. And, that process will be there. But if they don't have that income during that time period, it's very difficult, obviously, to accumulate money for retirement when your disability coverage, lots of group policies are like 60% of your income. It's not
Yeah,
replacing all of your income. Your focus is almost for sure going to be on your more immediate quality of life rather than trying to save, for retirement over time. So, in each situation, it's different, but that is exactly why you need that disability coverage, if possible, if you have access to it. It's important to consider that coverage because otherwise your ability to maintain quality of life is severely compromised.
yeah. Well, this was excellent. Thank you for sharing so much valuable information with us. Is there anything else that you want to add? I know our key takeaway is to make sure you have those foundational pieces in place and also have the understanding and awareness that getting a disability claim approved isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. So if that does happen, just be mindful of the challenges that you may encounter. Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I think one of the challenges in life right now is this idea of kind of either or, like yes, no, black white type of thing is in when we talk about insurance, it's not a fun conversation. I don't want to pay for long-term disability insurance. I don't want to pay for life insurance. I don't want to pay for any of these things. But in reality, I need these things to hedge in case of a catastrophic financial loss. And a long-term disability is a catastrophic financial loss. But conversely, I could spend all of my money on insurance trying to take care of these potential catastrophic losses. And so this balancing act of I need to, make sure I'm doing something to hedge this risk, but at the same time, I'm not spending so much that I'm compromising today's quality of life. That is really how these puzzle pieces of financial planning come together, where we can help guide somebody making those difficult decisions.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for adding that point. And until next time, have a good one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.